Opening slide graphic text title: Social Inclusion and Real Belonging at Work and in Community, with Dileo. Image of Dileo. Text: Purpose Matters Conference. Logos: Belonging Matters and TalksThatMatter.net.
Hi, my name is Dileo, and it's a pleasure to be with you virtually today. I'm excited to be able to talk to you about social belonging at work for people with disabilities. This is a subject I've been involved with for over 40 years. I began my career working at an institution, and that's me right there, before gray hair, and eventually became a director of an agency. Here I am with our workshop crew before becoming a trainer and a consultant. And during this time, after all those years, I learned that all of the teaching and treatments we had done over those years, while helpful, were not really dealing with what seemed to me to be the main issue that people with disabilities were facing. A life without any real meaning, a sense of isolation, and ultimately just loneliness. The idea of helping people get real jobs and not segregated work for poor pay was a major step, but it proved not to be enough. Along with my colleagues like David Hagner, we began to study ideas about building relationships, focusing not just on the work, but on locations, activities, and ultimately the social connections around people at the work they were doing. So let's begin by talking about how people experience social belonging through self-worth and social capital. When you get down to social belonging, there are really two major dimensions that can define you in the eyes of others: competency, or being seen as good at something, a work skill or a talent, and commonality, what you share in common with other people. There are some basics to our social networks through commonality, and here are a few. Having a home of your own, recreation, friends and family, community associations, a job doing what you enjoy. Let's explore this employment area in more depth. A job interacts with self-worth and social belonging in many ways. The money you make, which of course can contribute to many other parts of life, being able to buy nice clothes, eat at a restaurant, afford a nice place to live, and so on. Social identity. People connect what you do for work as part of who you are. Status. Having a job brings a certain sense of worth in the eyes of others. Relationships. People often make life connections and circles of friends through those they work with. And so on. Learning new skills, sense of meaning of the work done, a chance to contribute, a feeling of accomplishment. So, having and succeeding at a good job comes down to how well we do two things for those we support. One is the job match, making sure the job is a good fit. The other is the support plan. To describe how to do a good job match is a whole nother session, and it's probably been covered elsewhere in this conference. So let's assume we've made a good job match and zero in on our support. On-the-job support is one of the keys to success for customized supported employment. The fact that we add extra help for workers with various obstacles to their learning a job is one of our secret ingredients. Our field has a lot of good technology in breaking tasks down, teaching those with learning challenges, and adding things to a training sequence so that people can build up skills. This is great, but we used to do this, and still do unfortunately in many places, by imposing our disability technology into a workplace. This created social problems, and so we now look to use more natural supports where our training technology can be less intrusive. The idea of natural supports is based on prioritizing using whatever resources, including people, that are typically found in the setting that the person with the disability is in, to provide assistance, training, and other strategies. This is instead of adding supports that are not typically found within a natural environment. In addition, there's an underlying philosophy of taking active steps in the setting to help the individual connect socially with others that are regularly there. Support on the job has several factors. The first, and most important, is the natural support available and facilitated on the job location. Natural supports are those ways, inherent in the job itself, of helping the employee learn and succeed on the job. Social fit with coworkers and others is another aspect of that. These two areas are actually codependent on each other. Then there is the more traditional support of direct training and problem solving. Once the worker is functioning well at work and has a network of natural social support, external supports from the agency can be actively faded, so that the worker can generalize what's been learned to most of the work situations that will likely be encountered. Let's review how you can conceptualize the training sequence in light of our awareness of the importance of social belonging at the workplace. The first step is to communicate natural ways. There are always a number of different approaches to accomplish any task, but workplaces usually have tried and true preferred ways of doing things. So before a method of doing something is picked, explore with coworkers and ask, how are things usually done? Once you know the series of steps the worker will need to take, we should next promote natural means. These are the supports that will be used to provide prompts and assistance in the workplace. They should not be artificial and intrusive and should be acceptable and as naturally occurring as possible. Third, utilize natural people. Natural people sounds like a funny expression, but what we're referring to here is the existing coworkers and supervisors that work at the workplace. So when a prompt or explanation is needed, it should come from those who are normally there in the work setting. The job coach should be the person of last resort to give training cues to the worker. Facilitate successful performance. This is the role of acting as a consultant to the workplace. Noticing when a training approach is not being done or not being done properly by a coworker and making a suggestion, for instance. Finally, and when necessary, adopt, modify, and change natural ways. Sometimes the natural environment is simply insufficient or incapable of providing the training needed, and the job coach must intercede, maybe advising a new visual cue be added to a piece of equipment, or suggesting a change in a schedule. Or again, as the trainer of last resort, actually doing the prompting and error correction. All of these things will vary in intensity, but the overriding theme is always for the worker to experience a natural sense of learning and belonging to the culture of the worksite. This has to begin at the outset. Let's view the different ways orientation and training can impact the worker. But first, I want to emphasize two key underlying principles that block social acceptance. One, people are wary of individuals who are different. Difference can be anything from how you look, move, or talk. Someone's difference can take us out of our comfort zone. Not everyone reacts to difference this way, but it is a common psychological feature. Second, the difference itself, and whether it is valued, affects our willingness to connect with someone, whether it's fear, anxiety of saying or doing the wrong thing, or just avoidance. Unfortunately, having a disability falls into most people's idea of experiencing someone who is different. So overcoming the difference means often taking care to not exaggerate it or highlight the difference. So let's return to the starting point of the job, the orientation. Most businesses will look to orient a new worker by having a social welcoming process, introducing people, showing the new worker around, and so on, explaining early job performance and work routines. How do we help a worker with a disability accomplish this? Well, before we were aware of the importance of natural support, we would start the training not with the worker, but with the job coach, who would go in and learn the job. Then the worker would come in and be trained by the job coach. Well, as you would expect, this was a difference, something other workers didn't do, and we now have added that to the trainee. It isolated the worker and trainer from everyone else, and actually reduced the chances of any normal social welcoming process. So, right at the start, we added stigma to the worker. When the job coach had finished training, the worker was left but isolated, without establishing other relationships. We also don't want to leave the worker to be trained by whatever methods that workplace has. As a representative of the worker, we should have insight on how to best provide training to this person. We can advise on what works well and what doesn't. We can convey communication style and advocate for any special accommodations. So to sum up, the workplace knows the tasks and how they should be done. We should be knowledgeable about the worker and how that person learns best. We want to bridge any gaps, providing consultation and advice, but in a way that is as natural as possible, without getting in the way of social belonging. One way to do this is to start by exchanging information with the workplace staff. Then, as they are better prepared to train, have the new worker begin orientation, as others in a workplace have done, with a workplace trainer, but it has been advised by us on how to best approach the training. When any adjustments are needed, we first go to the trainer and provide our consultation. Sometimes this advice may also be needed with another coworker. Ultimately, we are job coaching a whole team so that the team is able to expand its diversity, while at the same time avoiding adding any further stigma to the new worker. But as we have talked about, learning to do the job isn't by any means the end to our support for someone's job success. Social belonging at work is key, and that means understanding how to become part of the social milieu of a workplace, something known as workplace culture. A key part of implementing natural supports relates to being able to analyze the social cultures of a workplace. Over time, working relationships develop among workers as they interact. The shared social customs, norms, and expectations that develop among the workers in a work organization is known as the workplace culture. The membership of a culture varies with what its members believe makes up belonging. Each workplace has its own culture with a wide range of defining characteristics. For instance, there may be an informal dress code or an expectation to take turns buying the coffee. The first step is building a cultural awareness of a workplace. Some aspects of culture are not obvious, and it might require becoming a bit of a social detective. As we noted earlier, becoming successful at a job does not consist solely in learning to perform a sequence of tasks, though that's certainly an important part. It also involves gaining admission to the culture of the setting and becoming a member of a social group. Cultures sometimes evolve or change suddenly, requiring the job coach to keep ongoing analysis to support the individual. What are some of the ways to learn about cultural norms? Let's look at a few. Stories, language, gestures. All cultures, even workplaces, tell stories. Those stories serve a purpose. They often contain important information about people and norms. Remember when Janice got caught smoking in her office? Or 2 years ago, we got that gift for Abby, and so on. Social activities, celebrations, and ceremonies. Social bonds often deepen during events that are only marginally related to work, like an office party, a workplace anniversary, or some other gathering. Work pace. The quantity expected. There might be expectations about how much work should be produced, or when certain things are supposed to occur. Learning when it is acceptable to take a break, for example, might be an important consideration for how others view you as a coworker. Territory, dress, and grooming. It's long been known that one of the ways of fitting in is through appearance. Norms of dress can signify belonging to the group, so observing what people wear and don't wear can convey important information and messages of social status. Cliques and relationships. Relationship maps can be complicated to understand. It can be important, however, to know whether there are coworkers and supervisors to avoid or those who are more likely to be helpful. Humor, teasing, food customs. These types of norms can subtly signal social acceptance. Being able to participate in food rituals, such as making coffee, buying snacks, or understanding a joke or a story that's going around, can be an important way to be a part of the culture. Initiations. Some workplaces like to have a tradition regarding new employees. It might be formal, such as a welcome gathering at the end of the person's first day of work, or something more informal, like playing a small joke on the person, such as hiding their lunch or their uniform. Whatever it is, a new worker with a disability, if possible, should be included with whatever accommodations are needed so that their participation is as natural as any other employee. Once we begin to understand the norms, rules, and expectations, we can support the individual to participate in its culture. Here are some examples. Build familiarity. Encourage routines that help the new worker have social exchanges with people. Personalized touches. Support the person to share ways to demonstrate preferences, like wearing something that displays your favorite sports team or having a photo of a pet at the worksite. Common interests. Facilitate the person to share information about a hobby or activity they like swimming or biking, playing a musical instrument. Social customs. Ensuring the person is included in any gatherings, birthday celebrations, or other informal events. Teasing and humor. These are invariably unwritten and sometimes complicated rules about when, who, what, how, that govern joking at the workplace. Help the person understand these rules around norms of teasing and joking. Underlying this approach is always to be aware of the fact of how coworkers perceive the employee is largely determined by what the job coach does. To begin with, the role of a job coach is largely unknown to most workplaces, so that's a bit of an obstacle at the start. So how that person defines themselves and talks about the worker can have a big influence on how the worker is perceived. So, job success relies on both good training so that the worker can perform the job, and how well the worker gains the acceptance and support of the people in the workplace. Think of this as training with natural validity. We have minimized any artificial intrusiveness in our effort to provide support. The traditional role of job coach should change. Rather than acting as caretakers, cue givers, and indispensable job supporters, job coaches need to serve as consultants and resources to employers, families, and supported employees. Research has shown that the presence of a job coach as the trainer for a new worker causes an obstacle to the natural process of social belonging there. There's a couple of other points we should cover. As coworkers get to know supported employees, coworkers and employers may be curious about and ask questions about an individual's disability, or want to ask a question and not know how to do it. This can be a healthy sign. The development of relationships usually involves the gradual disclosure of personal information, getting to know more about you as a person. Even though the questions may be unsophisticated, like, "What's wrong with James? Was he in an accident?" The intent is often innocent. There are several considerations for an employment consultant to keep in mind. People know very little specifics about disability, and ignorance can often breed anxiety. Mistaken stereotypical images of people with disabilities as children, or as dangerous or unpredictable, or as having unusual health problems, are often still widespread. They need to be confronted and dispelled, and one person at a time is usually the best way to do that. But like any exchange of personal information, the degree of disclosure and how much information should be shared should be controlled by the worker. And an employer or coworker has really no right to specific information about disability, only to the fact that the individual has a disability and the nature of whatever accommodations are needed to support that person on the job. So I've emphasized here the importance of fitting in with workplace social customs for social acceptance and inclusion. Occasionally, however, customs at a workplace might be so complicated or difficult to understand that it's very trying for an employee with a disability to learn them correctly. How far to go in teasing a coworker, how to play a prank on a new employee when those pranks are common, but you could cross the line. How far to go around things like swearing, when not to swear. All these are governed by social rules that can be very complex. Humor, for example, is complicated because it involves a very subtle twist of a usual rule. It may be hard enough to learn the usual rule, never mind a subtle twist. Difficulties with these kind of situations are one of the most frequent reasons for job loss among employees with disabilities. The skills themselves are complicated, and the identification of appropriate contexts for using those skills can be even more difficult to grasp. And not all coworker customs are known and authorized by the managers and bosses of a company. Some important customs may conflict with some of the management practices that the boss lays down. Some workplace customs are problematic because they are not officially allowed. Eating some of the food in a storeroom or extending a break time unofficially by several minutes are examples of that. In extreme cases, customs can even be crimes. The fact that people avoid discussing unauthorized customs or lie about them or carefully hide them from view makes it particularly difficult for an employment consultant to grapple with. So we've covered a lot in a short time, and this is a pretty big topic with a lot more to learn about social belonging and how culture influences and perception influences the job success of people who have disabilities on the job. Let me share a story that might illustrate this a little bit more. I worked with a young man named George who had limited use of the control of his motor functions of his body. He basically had the use of his right arm, which meant he could operate buttons and switches, but that was really about all he could predictably do with that movement. He had a lot of interest in sports and was a big fan of some local sports teams that we all knew, and enjoyed watching physical activities, watching people play sports. We ultimately found a opening at a fitness club where the owner was having difficulty keeping up with membership renewals. People would come in but not always show their membership card, and it was color-coded, and he didn't have the finances to set up something a little more digitally computer-based. So we talked him into trying to hire George as a membership monitor, which is what he did. So when you would go into the fitness club, you would see a sign that would say, "Please show your membership card," and we and the manager trained George so that he would be able to match the colors that showed the different times of the month that memberships would expire. So if you didn't have the right color, George's job was to press a button which would make a little light and a bell come on, and that would alert the manager to come over and request the person to go ahead and change their membership card and get it renewed. So eventually George got quite good at this job, and people learned not to mess with him because he would let the whole gym know if somebody came in with the wrong color card. George also changed in many ways while on the job. He began to have better hygiene. He began to take care of himself a little bit more. He began to socialize, enunciate his words better. People would begin to interact with him, and they'd come in and see George and ask him if he saw the game last night on television. These kinds of exchanges meant a lot, and the workers soon all rallied around George as well, and they became quite tight, very, very much a group in the sense of what a work team is really all about. This had more to do with their shared interests and passions and perceptions of George getting his job done, doing it right, enjoying his time there, connecting with the people around him. Even though he had limited vocabulary and limited articulation, it really didn't matter. People were happy to have him there, and George was happy to be there, and this carried over into his personal life as well. So the job success at this point was basically a matter of a very simple skill where George utilized his one motor movement, but far more encompassing was his social connectedness there, which carried over into his personal life. So again, not just a matter of doing the job, but doing it in a way that other people value what it is you're doing. So it all comes down to relationships. And there are lots of ways to define wealth in life, how much money you make, the things you own, where you live. But most people agree it's the people in your life that are most important. And so it is with job success. I hope this overview of social belonging at work has been helpful. Thanks for listening.
Closing slide graphic text with thanks to Dileo, CrowdComms Purpose Matters Conference 2022. This video was made possible with the support of an Information and Capacity Building grant through the Department of Social Services. Produced by Belonging Matters. Belonging Matters makes every effort to provide accurate and up-to-date material. However, information is subject to change, and our materials for reference only. This video was filmed on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation. Logos Belonging Matters, talksthatmatter.net.
Graphic text. More Purpose Matters conference videos. To watch more videos from the Purpose Matters conference, please head to free videos on the Talks That Matter website, talksthatmatter.net. Logos Belonging Matters, Talks That Matter.